like, why can't anyone put a fucking Genesis out on time? Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome.
Nailed it.
Nodes. A weekly podcast on the cosmos from independent validator teams. And what are we going to be talking about this week now?
Probably Usurper. I'm my brain's fried from not being awake, so I'm only a question answerer today, not a leader.
The background to this is actually going to be relevant to the topic we are going to be talking about, which is that Evmos have just restarted. I'm not a validator, and Needlecast don't validate Evmos, but we've just it's just restarted, right? And it was very early your time, Null, right?
Yeah, so it's 2 days in a row of like 2 a.m. We had a dry run previous day on my Wednesday, and then the mainnet this morning, which is my Thursday, both at 2 a.m. So then I had a full day after those, and I'm a little bit tired. I mean, actually, the dry run might have been later in the day, like 3 or 4. I can't remember. The days are all becoming one,
Nice.
as they should be for a validator. Why even have calendar?
Mm-hmm.
Throw it away.
I mean, it's not like we need like a break or something after Prop 16,
Sleep,
and 17,
breaks.
and 18, and 19.
Who needs rest and recreation? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair as well, in that time, there've been, 2 Stargates upgrades as well. I was thinking about, in terms of just like chains that have Cosmwasm and therefore have the same security cadence. It adds up to a lot of chain upgrades, which again, put a pin in that because we will be coming to that later in the episode, right, Usurper?
That's right. Yeah, we had a couple of things to follow up on just from previous weeks. We want to change the format a little bit and make sure that we're responding to questions that come up both in Twitter and also on YouTube, and make sure that we're bringing those forward on future episodes. We did want to talk a little bit today about some chain halts in the cosmos, because we're kind of seeing a lot of I don't know if a lot of halts, but maybe a lot of noise around pauses and things like that. So I think we'd talk about that. And we have a few good questions for Ask Game of Nodes. We need to come up with an acronym for that. Maybe Ask On.
Ask on.
Ask on something. Yeah. So that should be it.
Yeah. Cool. So we're abandoning the stupidest shit we've seen in Cosmos this week because we felt it was a bit too negative and we need some more positivity. So instead, we're gonna talk a little bit about stuff that's happening at the moment, and to kick it off on a positive note. We obviously all talk about what music we're listening to, and we actually talked to. I think this was maybe off the back of the conversation with Shane and Sisler in the previous episode where we were, asking what they listen to when they're working and stuff like that. And I think Ghost was shouting out No Taker, right? And that's then gone on the rotation, I think, for the entire crew.
It's on rotation for me all weekend.
Yeah,
the entire playlist of No Taker.
Yeah, apart from like, I think there's a strong progressive rock degenning going on between me and Usurper, but
there is,
and there was some.
Well, I've actually been hitting those bands as well. I've been developing a bit of a playlist.
Yeah, but you didn't notice the didgeridoo in the Australian progressive rock, did you?
So there was another song that started off with didgeridoo, but I didn't notice this one that was at the end of a song. But to be fair, I was like listening to this while I was doing work, so I wasn't fully concentrating on it.
Or it could have been coming from outside, right? Maybe just outside the window.
Yeah.
People just walk around over there with didgeridoos?
Pretty much.
Well, I'm in a cul-de-sac, so it'd be unusual. Maybe out on the main road.
Just circling.
You know what, the thing that really shitted me about Australia was just the fact that you can just like walk into a field and there's just like 100 wallabies. And you're like, okay. Like why do we keep it? It's like sheep or something, kind of the north of England, right? You go to the hills, there's just a field full of sheep, and you go to Australia and you just like there's a field full of wallabies, and you're like, holy shit! There's like, you just walk in there and just like with a bag and just a net or something and just collect the fuckers up if you're so inclined. It feels like, I don't know how quick they are. Have you ever caught a wallaby, Noel?
Oh, I think he's out.
He's frozen.
Oh, he's frozen.
It's too serious a question. It's too heavy duty.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that no matter who's on this podcast, somehow it comes back to Australian culture. There's always that topic. We should just put it in the topics because it's always like a didgeridoo comes up or a wallaby comes up or something comes up. But every
is it
time,
Australian? That's Australian wildlife, not Australian culture.
I was trying to be nice, but yeah, whatever. It's a mix of different Australian things.
Yeah. So yeah, No Taker has been very heavy this week, and then I guess we want to also have a little bit of talk about the Juno upgrade that's coming, right? Because Prop 20 is now happening after all those props you knew and loved, 17, 18, 19.
Yeah. So maybe to give an update for everyone who's not following this as much as we are. Anybody want to take a shot on 16, 17, 18?
Or Schultze, you want to give try and explain what's happening now?
Don't want to do that.
I mean, so I read a tweet by the Whale the other day that I was curious about. Isn't it normal for a binary to be assigned to an upgrade rather than kind of like the binary being created after the upgrade is assigned? I didn't know you could do that. I thought that they were like bound together 1-to-1.
No, it's just a tag, right?
Just a tag, yeah.
It's just a tag. So the binary exists, but it is dependent on it will run the thing that it's called, but it as long as it's the same name.
Frey,
isn't
that only a Cosmovisor type of thing that it's calling out? There's nothing actually in the binary with that name.
There's nothing in the binary. Yeah, you can just halt and switch over because that's what we did for security patches, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there's no connection between the binary and the actual. No, it's just like you can put any binary in there. It just won't agree with everyone else. So it's got to be coordinated.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
the only thing that the prop with the software upgrade, the only thing that's related to actually upgrading is the directory that you put the binary in with Cosmovisor.
If they're using that,
that's the only thing.
Okay.
So you can have can say in the
because it emits the upgrade info.json, which is the output of the governance halt height.
And
you could technically like have your upgrade, and in your upgrade proposal say you're going to version 3 and then separately agree with all of the validators to go to version 28. And
I guess to clarify a little bit, I think it's more significant to me that the smart contract isn't actually merged yet, right? Isn't that true?
You know that's bullshit.
Is it bullshit?
Yeah, it's available.
It's like it was not live for a grand total of about 10 seconds because I think I didn't have admin privileges on the repo in the Juno organization to make it live, and so just had to wait for somebody who had admin privileges to wake up, because it was like, guys, this link's dead. Can we just make the link undead, please?
Unprivate it.
Yeah, it is true that the contract wasn't publicly available before the prop went live, but obviously we wrote up a blog post about it, and the design was the same as on the original Unity prop thread and blah 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 blah. So in that sense, nothing's really changed about that other than the code was written to conform to the Unity prop, and then it was audited, and then some more unit tests have been added as well just after the tag that's mentioned. So in the text that's on chain, it specifically references a Git commit on the repo. So it's like really specifically, this is the tag and the binary, and it has a WASM blob and a checksum. So the governance proposal is pretty specific about, unless there's a huge security hole in this that's discovered between prop and hypothetically it being launched, this is the one that is expected to run.
Got it.
But yeah, it wasn't public before that just because it wasn't, basically. I think it was more of a too many cooks type situation because there were
too many cooks.
A lot of feelings on this one, and a lot of people, and a lot of noise, and the difficulty of finding people who are just going to implement a thing, because it's all open source. Again, the thing with the Unity prop is it's just an open source smart contract. It can be used to arbitrate between any parties, and it just kind of needed to be done and then like checked over and stuff. And so it was just one of those things that was done. So like obviously we did like a lot of work on it, and we're against the burn, right? But it is kind of pretty clear, I think, to us at the very least, and obviously Jabby, who did a lot of the work on the upgrade side and also on the testing, is also against the burn, but it's kind of back to I think we were talking about this with economic incentives and whatnot like a few weeks ago on the show when we were talking about the original drama, which is that if you hold enough Juno tokens and you think they might be at risk of being confiscated, your optimal strategy is probably to stall, right, until because if the token goes to 0, you lose nothing. If you lose more, you lose nothing, or you lose the same amount,
Yeah.
So in terms of breaking the impasse, that's kind of, I think, both. I can't obviously speak for Jabby, who is currently, I believe, in the Jabby wagon, but will be joining us in a few minutes' time. I think that was kind of both of our interest in helping out with this piece of work, is that there are only so many devs in the junior organization. There's only so many that can help to ship this particular problem. And, it's kind of clear that something needs to happen. So even if we don't agree with all of the potential options on the table, like it's kind of hard to see how we can move forward,
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the essence of it. So it was one of those where all the devs on the project, I think, in the GitHub organization could see it during the process it was being built, but we forgot to make it public when the first thing went on chain. So ultimate tease, no, we're not teasing anything. We're talking about the Unity prop smart contract at the moment. So that's where we're up to with that. What else needs to be covered, Schultzy? Because I interrupted you a little bit there.
I mean, I think that's really the big thing, is that Unity prop is a software upgrade that basically takes the funds from the whale and puts it in the smart contract. That's the summary of it, essentially. I suppose I have a few questions around upgrade, the next prop, upgrade 20. Like, will there be more security patches in it, or is it specifically for initiating Unity? But that's kind of neither here nor there.
It has a RC version of a Cosmosm change in it, which is tagged Junity for Juno Unity, which is our submitted fix for the Cosmosm pseudo bug that we found. But it's not a security. No, there's no security element of that. But obviously we did do the security patch last week, which I think a lot of people didn't even notice we did, which was a Cosmosm security bug. That's a different thing.
Okay. So in this proposal ends on the 29th. We still have a couple days, right? And then I think the upgrade block is farther out, right? We're early May or something similar to that, if I remember doing the math.
Yeah, 4th May. Yeah.
And we were also talking separately that obviously there's some controls here around. There's not enough time, obviously, to do undelegations and those types of things. There are some questions about what might happen to anything that's liquid, or might be rewards and those type of outstanding rewards. But that's just, it is what it is, right? There's no controls over that, and there's nothing similar to be able to do that between now, by the time that upgrade block hits, which looks like it's just about a week, 6 days and 17 hours from now.
Yeah. So because there's a lot of things that are going on with this upgrade. It's particularly hairy, particularly controversial, I guess. But the key thing is that is essentially having enough time that we knew we could get everything in place to actually do the upgrade, and also crucially have enough time to back out of the upgrade if we needed to. So something that isn't very often done is a cancel software upgrade proposal, which can stop an upgrade from happening. It means you can just no-op it. And although we've obviously tested it, we're also rolling uni forward, because obviously that's testnet that should go forward before mainnet does. And so if there is something discovered on uni that is a showstopper, we need enough time to roll to basically stop what we're doing on mainnet and then move forward in a more measured way, because that we're running a very complicated piece of software here with the Juno chain. And
Sure.
although we've obviously tested it in a variety of different scenarios, it's only really when you use the kind of whatever is 25 validator set
Right.
uni testnet with lots of big smart contracts on it, like Juno swap and all this kind of stuff, that we can be 100% sure that everything is kind of behaving as it should be. So that's the reason we thought we'd build it in a couple of days. And obviously Raw's going live on the 1st of May, so we were like, well, we can't do it on the 1st of May, so we just said, oh well, 3 extra days is probably fine, it's not a security patch, so
Right.
there isn't a particular reason to target a particular day.
Okay. So I guess we'll talk about it next week, right?
Yeah.
Since
Well, I
it
also
will-
wonder, we might attempt an upgrade cast, right? Which might go
can.
more
Yep.
smoothly than the last one, where some people obviously remember when we did the upgrade when we restarted the chain after the cyber attack, we did a game of nodes for that, and then everybody got stuck processing invariants for anywhere between
Right,
2 and
4
12
hours.
hours, right? Yeah.
12 hours. Yeah, 12 hours. And
Actually,
go ahead, Noel.
sorry, actually, just on that, with our forward planning here, we have potentially 2 podcasts next Wednesday
Or we just
on
combine
the same day.
Maybe we just do it earlier and work it around the upgrade block and see what time it happens.
Yeah,
I
we
think-
have potential guests next week, so
Oh, maybe we do it twice. Can you have too much game of notes? I don't know.
probably
Well,
not.
I think the audience can be the can be the judge of that one.
That'd be a good poll.
Yeah, do we have too much game?
It's
in
4
it?
hours too
Please-
much.
Please
Yeah.
stop and revert to 1 per month.
Exactly.
Halt what you're doing.
And the contract runs, so just so I understand from a smart contract perspective and the actions that are going to happen when this upgrade block occurs, this will happen in the block after, or I guess it's buried into the upgrade itself. So does that contract run as soon as all the validators, we have consensus on the upgrade, everything else, then the contract executes, or how does that work when it comes to when the contract kind of initiates?
So the contract is completely separate to the Unity upgrade. Maybe that is
Okay.
actually something worth clarifying.
Yeah.
I obviously, so we need a cast did a bunch of dev work. Other people, obviously, other devs in Juno contributed to all of the many moving parts here. Somebody needs to deploy the Unity smart contract. I don't know who that would be. Presumably somebody in core. It's just a contract that gets deployed without an admin. So once it's been deployed, it can't be changed.
Right.
And then what the Unity handler does is unstake funds and move them into the control of the contract.
Okay.
So ideally,
I
that would
see.
have happened consensually, because what it essentially does, what the handler does, the upgrade handler, amongst other things, obviously one of them is bump a couple of versions of things, but it bypasses the need to wait 28 days to unstake and then also have those funds at risk of being sold as liquid funds. So it
Right.
just makes that this block, I am saying the unbonding period is done.
Those
move
change.
to
Yeah.
the smart contract, and then that's the balance is then held there in the smart contract. So whoever instantiates the contract is essentially just instantiating the contract with a representative wallet from CCN that they're known to hold.
Okay.
Because so obviously this contract can actually be used for any escrow situation which has very, very low trust. In this situation, I guess we're talking about CCN, right? So they would be the admin of that contract. So there's an admin that allows you to migrate the contract and change the code. that's not what we're talking about here. There is this smart contract has a concept of the owner of the funds. And the owner of the funds in this case would be CCN.
Right.
And as we described in the episode previously we did on what the Unity smart contract was and how it might work, they basically can trigger a withdrawal with a 28 days delay to get their liquid funds back. And then on the other side of the coin, the community can send X amount of the funds, send all of the funds, or burn the funds. So it is essentially the staking part of the Juno or the Cosmos SDK, if you like,
Mhm.
the unbonding bit, the timer, but set to a Juno length, but without the stake, without them needing to be staked in the first place, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
from a developer's perspective, and I think from a lot of the technical people involved in the project, the thing that concerns us most about CCN essentially having way more voting power than having way more voting power, is the problem, I think, for a lot of devs and validators and whatnot who look at that as no entity should have this much power on chain.
Right.
So that solves that sort of straight away. As for the rest of it, it's a bit more complicated.
Right.
The way that works is that there is a special entry point to the contract that can be called by the governance module of the SDK. So you can submit props that pass the message, and if the message is understandable by the contract, it will run. But the contract has to exist before that prop can happen. And incidentally, this is also why, off the top of my head, so Deus Labs, who are very, very involved in Cosmwasm, very lovely people, very smart, do loads of great stuff running RPCs and just loads of great stuff. Also Juno Tools, right, which is a great piece of heavily involved in that. So Deus Labs, I think, like Needlecast, had a similar opinion of Prop 19, which is that if the Unity smart contract existed, Prop 19 could have actually been done as a gov prop calling the smart contract. And sort of like the community would have had to agree to it, and it would have essentially them saying, we want to be able to distribute from a Merkle drop contract to KYC people, which is a reasonable thing to say. If they had gone away, KYC their customers, demonstrate they exist. So using, say, one of the services that we as validators have had to go through for some chains, which are quite thorough enough that, for example, we had to provide a whole bunch of documentation to prove that we were in fact not a scam company, because who's ever heard of the United Kingdom anyway? American KYC. So they were just like, what are these things? And you're like, this is like a normal business anyway, whatever. So if they did KYC their clients, and there was a big list of them, and then they went, okay, these are the addresses, these are the people we want a Merkle drop to, we've instantiated contract, here's the contract address. They could then just submit a gov prop that says send the funds here, or send X amount of funds here, and people could vote on it. If it passed, boom, funds go. So this is why, in short, some people who are more experienced with the smart contract side of things, like Needlecast, like Deus Labs, a couple of others, said that we would have actually voted yes on Prop 19 if it had come after Unity Prop, because they would have had to implement the code for it, do the KYC, and then those are real people, fine. Like, from our point of view, that's the whole point of this exercise.
Can you take a second to clarify what a Merkle drop is? I've heard that thrown around quite a bit, but I don't know. Is Merkle a person?
So Merkle tree is the name of the underlying data structure, essentially, that powers like Git and a bunch of other things, blockchains.
Tom Merkle.
Is it Tom? I should, other than that he was not that he or they were an academic.
Sure.
So why is it called a Merkle drop then?
I think it's to do with the way the so rather than it just being like a massive boom, here's all the addresses, I think it's about the way that the data structure is encoded that represents the addresses that will be dropped to.
Yeah, it uses a Merkle proof. to store the addresses so that it doesn't take up so much data on chain.
Fascinating. Got it.
Real-
Thank
better.
you.
Real-time follow-up named after Ralph Merkel.
Ralph Merkel.
I just put the
Thanks,
link in the
Ralph.
show notes. You got it.
Thanks
Yep.
for saving us that sweet data.
Yeah.
Yep. Went to Berkeley. What do you know?
There you go. That's
you
why
go.
all the blockchain stuff.
It all comes through Berkeley. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So just seen this question. Does the withdrawal address from the owner generate a proposal? They have permission to withdraw. What's that mean? Oh, right. So this is talking about the Unity smart
It
contract
is.
again.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't generate a proposal. It's just a normal instruction to a smart contract. So the only entity that can interact with the smart contract via the normal execute endpoint is the withdrawer, as they're called, which is not a very elegant name, but naming stuff is hard. And yeah, so that's that. That's how the Unity smart contract works. And like I said, we have an entire episode about this before the smart contract had actually been written, really, discussing how it might hypothetically work. If you're interested in it, from a few weeks ago, episode 4, episode 3, episode 2, maybe 2.5. So we're on episode 8 now.
We need a list of like our episodes off to the side here, so we can name drop them for various reasons.
Just go
Yes,
listen
we
to
can
them
remember
all.
which ones are which.
Start at
You
one.
know, now that we've got more than 2, it's hard to remember.
Yes and no. So the thing that's just come up on screen is that those are not real people. I assume that means that refers to the clients of CCN.
I would assume so.
So I think the reason that we were talking about KYC before is because, we've all had to do it as validators for some chains, and whilst not perfect, if you do KYC, it's pretty hard to actually game it effectively. It would take. It's a little bit like the moon landings, right? Like the Occam's razor as it happened, because when you do statistical analysis, it turns out that in order to do the fake moon landings, you need nearly as many people as did the real moon landings, and they'd all have to agree to lie about it. So you can do a mathematical model to work out how long it would take on average, based on conspiracies we know about that have been revealed, that somebody would blab.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out for the moon landings, it's huge. It's like 2 years maximum that somebody would just blab on their deathbed or something like that. And some math. I can't remember if they were economists or mathematicians. They did this for a variety of conspiracy theories, and then did a bunch of real conspiracy theories that came out, abducting people and giving them LSD and all that sort of stuff that did happen in the 60s, and how long that took to came out, which wasn't very long. Spoiler. So with regards to there being potentially 30,000 clients that may or may not be owed this Juno, being that they are real people and could be KYC'd, Occam's razor is if you KYC 30,000 people and they turn out to be real people, then the orchestration work to fake 30,000 people is much more work than just them being real people, probably. And I know there's a lot of money involved, but
There's
quite hard to organize that and then make sure nobody blabs out of 30,000 people. So again, Occam's razor, I think, comes into play there.
I think that you just gave the longest-winded explanation of Occam's razor I've ever heard. Normally it's just the simplest solution is probably the correct one, and you just really went out for it.
Well, it's because the simplest solution is the correct one, but also when conspiracies are kind of thrown up, you can also say, well, look, there is also quite sophisticated mathematical modeling that's been done on conspiracies and whether or not they do conform to Occam's razor. And it turns out conspiracy theories and conspiracies are disprovable with Occam's razor for that reason, if you care to do the maths, which obviously I'm not a mathematician, but I read a very interesting article in The Economist about this, and I'm passing it off as my own thing.
we'll find that as well. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I thought it was really interesting. I didn't realize that so much effort had gone into kind of prove the moon landing in such a way. If you think about it, you kind of if it were fake, then why didn't anybody that was filming it say it was fake, kind of deal? But I didn't realize that there was actually models put to proving that it was in fact real.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's a whole bunch of other examples of that which they did, like 9/11 and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is still definitively flat, though.
Yeah, but they couldn't prove that the Earth was round. at the end of the article, they're like, they're like, but moon landings definitely happened.
But
9/11 wasn't an inside job, but Earth flat, not flat, don't know.
Dinner plate for sure.
there's-
It's a fucking dinner plate.
Is climate change real though? I think that's the real question.
Oh god.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hedge and buy some carbon credits on regen anyway, just in case.
Degen to regen.
Degen to regen.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
They're
before
cheap at the moment.
Speaking of degen, before we move on to today's topic of the day, Frey, you had something in here about
still here?
your degen minute.
Oh yeah, okay. So probably need to set a stopwatch for this because I don't want to spend more than a minute on it. Which I can do with a smartphone, I think, with the power of the stopwatch thing. So
I'm going to give you the keys to the Lamborghini.
that's a really old reference. Anyway, so some people will know that so name service that we've been working on for a while is doing a name drop, which is for the governance DAO, and we're basically been talking about when we're going to do the snapshot. On the team who's working on that, it's a little bit separate because there's lots of people involved. That's happening on May 4th, and the reason that we've said snapshot and not name drop is there's actually two different components. There's the name drop, which we've already talked about, which is to users of the service, and there's also going to be a separate snapshot on the 4th, which is a more general but smaller one, I guess, which is because we are launching a project called Howl, and they're both going to be brought together into the same project called the Howl DAO, and Howl DAO, gotta love it, with a token called Howl, and that is kind of where the decentralized name service project is going, and that's 1 minute, and there will be a public alpha hopefully in June, and so that is the keys to the Lamborghini section, and that's my degen minute.
Awesome.
A minute of degen from the Frey.
1 minute of degenning, because we've had so many questions about the various drops and whatnot. So now I can just point people to this and go
to this episode and say, find
Yeah.
the minute, guys. Maybe in the description of this we can put like just one bookmark is like that.
Yeah, we'll put some links in there for sure.
degen.
Well, that's exciting, man. That's great. Okay. So today's topic, we want to talk a little bit around, I think, something that came up from a little bit of previous conversation, I think, within the Game of Nodes extended crew, and then it came up in a couple other episodes here and there. And I'm not sure, I think this might have actually started out a little bit out of a price conversation, maybe is where this began, which I don't think we want to be able to talk about, but the topic came around about the number of maybe recent or 2022 chain halts. And so we've had halts on Juno and, Evos, and we've seen it yesterday in Akash and other types of things that have come up for a variety of different reasons, whether that be upgrade based or maybe something somewhat malicious or, XYZ, a bunch of different areas. And I think the idea was that it'd be good to have a little bit of a conversation to say, is this, do we think as a group in this conversation and extended, is this something should we be expecting this? Does this show us this is a show of, a sign of instability? Is this really a technical problem, or is this more of a branding problem, in terms of halts? Does it actually matter? Does it create or reduce confidence? So I think that was kind of the idea, is we see it and it doesn't really affect, as a validator, it doesn't really affect me. Personally, I know that it's a very complicated system. And from my perspective, there is a tremendous number of moving parts here, more than almost any other system that I've worked on, that usually is built around code with a very limited number of interactions. And here, when you talk about, more and more distributed systems that are global, with the amount of interaction and it's just the amount of development that's occurring. And also, I think the amount of openness and really public pen testing that's occurring, I think it's part of from my perspective, it's just part of growth. But I don't know what you guys are all thinking about. And, is it just a branding problem? And should we somehow address that branding problem?
I think for me, it's worth dividing up the chain halts into like two different categories, right? It's like you have a chain halt during an upgrade, and then you have a chain halt due to like some sort of exploit. I think those are very significantly different things. the question of a chain halt during an upgrade, is that a big deal? In my opinion, I don't really consider it a big deal. Wrangling validators is like wrangling cats, especially the fact that we're global. And so whenever chain goes forward within, let's say, half an hour, that's like all of us have a sigh of relief of like, wow, this was like the best thing ever. Whenever it takes 2 hours, not unexpected. When it takes 12 hours, a little bit more unexpected. So in my mind, when a chain halts during an upgrade, fine, moving on. That's okay. Whenever it halts due to the exploits such as what halted Juno last time, that's something I don't know about. I think that's something that's inevitably going to happen. I think that there are a couple of attack vectors that we haven't really addressed yet for chain halting.
Well, I guess
But-
so. I have a question maybe, which is that how often do you hear about proof of work chains halting in that style, be it from an attack vector or from any other for any other reason, you know?
So I think factors to consider when you're pondering that, though, is that for in the side of Bitcoin, like Bitcoin doesn't do anything other than make blocks with transaction data. It doesn't have anything more in it that can make it more unreliable. But certainly for the Ethereum side of things, but it doesn't have finality either for like a certain amount of blocks. So I think there's trade-offs for like, you're trading off like different things, but yeah, it's still worth the conversation.
Well, so I guess my question is, if there's a chain halt on proof of work, that effectively means a fork, right? Whereas for proof of stake, it doesn't really mean a fork because we're all like coordinated. So I guess that's my thought of like, well, for proof of work, it would just keep going one way or another. And then for proof of stake, that just means everything halts for a while. That it's an interesting topic that I haven't quite thought about too much yet and can't really speak of.
So, I mean, I don't validate on any other types of networks like Polkadot or whatever other ones are out there, Ethereum. So I really don't know if they suffer the same types of issues when you're, getting random halts, whether it be like, I think I'm not sure exactly what the Akash one was because I'm not a validator on Akash, but I mean, we're sort of building custom, well, these networks are building custom app modules, which sort of interacts with the Tendermint as well. So it's not just smart contracts. It's also like a different methodology of making functionality on the chain. So, I mean, every time you do something in that fashion, there's a chance that you balk something within Tendermint or any of the other Cosmos SDK modules. So, because it's a different setup. It's modularized and people can sort of mess with things on an individual basis. And it's got like in a lot of cases, like, the chain has got a less of a dev network around it. Whereas if you look at Ethereum or Polkadot, Ethereum's probably got thousands of devs looking at the code before it goes out.
Yeah, and I guess also they're more tolerant to forks, right? Because if the new software isn't adopted, then that, like Shorty was saying, is a fork by default, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose like the need to coordinate is itself something of it has its pros and its cons, right? Because it is something of an attack vector in of itself, and at the end of the day, we're dealing with a black box of software which the halting problem applies, right? So we don't 100% know what's going to happen with the code.
I think I want to talk just a second about like why is it that proof of work forks whereas proof of stake doesn't? So the reason why proof of work just basically forks instead of halts is because for proof of work, like it has infinitely reducing consensus basically that can continue a chain going. So basically what happens is, let's say that half of the chain upgrades and half of the chain doesn't. Effectively what happens is the half of the chain that did upgrade, they will keep going off in their direction and keep processing. And then the chain that didn't upgrade, they will also keep processing. The problem is what they're doing is providing no value. And odds are that their network isn't being used. And so then they have every incentive to immediately figure out what went wrong and get onto the correct chain, because they're not making any funds. These computers aren't making any funds anymore. Proof of stake, on the other hand, you need that consensus. If that consensus isn't reached, then the chain isn't moving forward, full stop, as a chain halt is.
So with the proof of work model, if you don't, so say, 60% of the network or even 40% changes to a new binary, and then so it forks off, like how do you know which is the main fork and which is not the main fork?
So basically what happens with proof of work generally is apps will agree to switch over to the correct fork at a given time, right? So like if they choose not to, that's how Ethereum Classic starts to exist, right?
Mhm.
Because people or whatever apps were like, well, I want to continue using this. And so then Ethereum Classic became something. So once those apps move to the new upgrade, that's whenever it's accepted as a new one.
So is that proof of work in general? Like, does Ethereum currently work the same way?
I don't know that it's proof of work in general. That's my understanding of Ethereum specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's probably how Bitcoin works as well. Then.
Yeah, I think
Bitcoin's like a lot more simple in terms of like
Yes.
functionality.
I think we're also exposing the fact that we're not really protocol engineers, so there is a little bit of black box behavior going on here at some level. The thing I'm really interested to read, actually, which I saw appear the other day but I've not read yet, is a paper by Dr. Martin Kleppmann about conflict resolution data types and Byzantine fault tolerance, using those as a foundational building block, which I very, very much look forward to not understanding until I've read it 4 times. But I mean, I guess that's more about data modeling in some ways than it is about, I guess, chain architecture. Although, there is a question. So, conflict resolution data types are a kind of distributed systems primitive for sort of resolving data coming from heterogeneous sources. But generally employed in a kind of trusted environment. But I mean, if they're sort of now writing about Byzantine fault tolerance, that means that they're thinking about the application of that technology in trustless environments, which I think is very, very interesting. As a kind of like different primitive to blocks, right? Because blocks are block, hash, next block, hash. Whereas CRDTs are more, I don't know what program. I was about to say they kind of feel like an ML type thing, but I actually don't know what programming heritage they come from as a theory, other than a lot of the people who are involved in the theory behind them seem to have been involved in large distributed systems for the web giants, basically, the sort of stuff like Apache Kafka and Storm and Samza and blah 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 blah, all this kinds of like streaming architecture, heavily sharded web scale database type tech. So that's kind of interesting.
So bring it back to the Cosmos. Like if we get away from the POW POS type of thing within the Cosmos, do you guys feel like these halts, like even the upgrade halt, I think it wasn't so much like just a small halt for waiting for validators to build consensus around a new version or something similar to that. The Akash one, I think the Akash issue yesterday, and Greg, listen, I hope I don't ruin this, but my understanding of it is that the upgrade went fine. They understood that there was a defect in the inflation module that did not show up on testnet. So they paused everything again because the inflation was like ridiculous. It was like, I don't know, somebody posted it was like 9,000%. They paused it again. And then during that pause, I'm not sure what happened, but they ended up coming up with another defect associated to a Cosmos SDK issue that had some sort of memory type of problem that was in there, some sort of incorrect pointer or something on a memory issue, which was, I guess, a known Cosmos SDK issue, but that was only within the last 5 days, which means that was identified and there was already maybe a patch already there or something similar to that. So they had to basically do another kind of PR that was sitting on top of that. And so I think that came up maybe it was at the same time as that. So as people are restarting after this defect, then it paused again. Please shut your nodes down, all that kind of stuff. And I think the outage wasn't that long. I think it was only like 3 or 4 hours, if I remember correctly. Maybe a little bit longer than that. And then back to the Juno halt, that's a permissionless contract structure, right? So you have a lot of actors that are looking for ways to poke holes in WASM, and WASM is moving very quickly, right?
Yep,
it's moving very quickly, right? So even those, not like you guys are looking at, I'm not sure how far by that release goes, but I don't think you're looking at releases that are 6 months ago that are extremely stable, right? We're looking at things that are just being built because we want to take advantage of functionality.
But it's worth bearing in mind, CosmWasm is still not fully at version 1. Like it is at version 1 beta 8 currently.
What's a beta?
Beta,
like alpha kind of thing.
Sorry,
I think he's poking fun at your enunciation.
Honestly, Australian culture and UK pronunciation is all we have in the show. That's it.
Well, to be fair, I think like if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I probably would have said alpha and beta. Wait, alpha and beta. Whatever. It would have been closer to the American pronunciation, but I've been living in the North for a long time, so everything gets sharpened. Everything's eep pronunciation.
Better.
Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead, please.
It was just I know. So I just wanted to say that the thing worth bearing in mind about CosmWasm is it's moving very, very quickly, because a lot of this stuff is coming out as a result of change that using it in the wild or audits or whatever, and it's it's moving fast necessarily because it is new software that is still pre-stable in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And when there is like a version 1 that is like super gold standard, maybe that will be like an LTS or something. I mean, I can't speak to their exact schedule and how they're going to how Confio and Co are going to actually sort of run that, but maybe that's what they have planned, like kind of minting an LTS type maintenance release, and then it will go from there. But the fact that there is beta alpha software in production is also part of the reason why there are so many critical fixes coming in, I think, particularly on the CosmWasm front. But it's also hard to see with so many low level dependencies of these projects that are once you add together dependencies plus transitive dependencies, it's a very large surface area. It's kind of hard to see how it will slow down even when CosmWasm stabilizes. So I guess my question is it that we are seeing more chain halts and more of this fun stuff happening, or is it just that there are more chains in the Cosmos now that are being more widely used, and so it's more visible?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that there are certainly more chains in the Cosmos in the last even 6 months. They've just been exploding out. But I wanted to circle back around to your point that this is all beta software. That point really can't be emphasized enough. Like, I had a meeting with Interchain Foundation like on a Thursday about interchain accounts. And they're like, there's this problem where interchain accounts, right now, there isn't really a good use case for them, because right now a relay would need to add a new channel for every single account that was made interchain effectively. So right now, anytime there's like a channel between like Evmos and Osmosis, there's a new channel for that. So every single user would need a new channel. That was a Thursday. A Monday, a PR came out that fixed it. So literally in 3 days, a new thing came out that resolved it, that the person I had talked to like had assumed that we were a long ways out from. And things like that happen a lot, where like you go into a conversation and you both have the same understanding of like, okay, so this is a cool feature, but it's not quite ready for prime time. 3 days later, that prime time has been reached. And so that just, as things happen like that, and since we're moving in such a breakneck pace, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, well, state sync WASM, like prime example, we're like that feature has been blocked, that piece of work has been blocked or unfinished or still discussed for like a year. I know Juno was talking about it when Juno went mainnet, and then it's kind of poodled along a little bit here and there, and then like literally last week, like Asaf was tweeting, "Oh yeah, no, we're pretty much there," and you're like, "Oh
yeah." So
happened quickly.
that one was like someone figured out that you just, sort of had a fix to manually make it work. And then I think everyone just muddled along with that for 6 months and like, that'll do.
Right.
And then, someone, a big brain, a wrinkle brain was in the background actually making it work properly.
I mean, it probably wasn't like because I kind of saw somebody was working on it and then saw that the fix was announced like a few days later. So the likelihood is that it was actually only announced as a thing that people were working on when it was nearly done. Yeah, it probably had been worked on for longer, but there are a lot of things like that where you're like, oh yeah, that isn't going to be ready for a while, and then somebody will be like, dude, it was released yesterday, and you're like, what?
Yeah. So not only are there that the main line is beta, specifically with WASM, but you've also got forks of beta. So like Luna, for example, which is like their own sort of bastardization of beta. So
well, it's pre version 1, so it's not even one of the beta releases. It's 0.16, I think, of CosmWasm.
So, but I think they've sort of implemented some functionality to do with like interaction with 1.0, right? Like it's still.
I mean, like case in point. I don't know. Like I know that there are a few things about their model that are fundamentally different, like migrations, like a few other things that just do not function in the same way. So I know that there are points where the code is just incompatible, and there are obviously things. There are things that are incompatible between beta 6 and beta 8 of CosmWasm version 1. So I think it's probably more unstable on the CosmWasm contract side than it is on at the actual chain level. Like some of that stuff will be able to interact, but you won't be able to deploy a contract from one to the other, if you know what I mean. You probably have to write 2 versions of the same contract and then have them do sort of do like receive and stuff if you wanted them to interact.
Yeah.
But just like
so it'd have to be specifically written to interact with that other contract.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding, isn't it? Because anyway, because essentially when you're messing around with that kind of stuff, you're basically just implementing a protocol, aren't you, to do the receive and send. Again, that's actually I'm kind of going to show my ignorance here because it's actually slightly different, isn't it, depending on what you're interacting with over IBC. Because if you, for example, use ICS20, you're just going to send it straight to the bank module of the other chain, so you don't need another contract as a receiver on the other one. But there are examples like IBC Reflect. You can have is it IBC Reflect I'm thinking of? I think IBC Reflect is the name of the thing I'm thinking of, where you can see how you can interact with a thing that's on a different chain, and maybe like those kinds of examples.
Chain halts.
Yeah.
Man, I was like, you're getting into the weeds here, dude. Just get back out. Are we kind of done on chain halts? Like they happen. They're sort of because of fast development. They tend to get fixed reasonably quickly, except for in the case of Evmos, which took a little bit longer. But I think they had some more fundamental things, and they didn't want to rush it.
Well, they are fundamental to proof of stake as well. I mean, I think we've also established that too, which
is
the thing. And arguably, it's a flaw of proof of stake, right? Because so if we want to talk about there's something final interesting, which is I think worth alluding to, right? Which is that BitTorrent worked because the way it encoded incentives was such that you were always incentivized to send the data, right? So all the clients fundamentally would send the data because the way the economic incentive, well, it wasn't economic because you didn't, insofar as you got something back, which is, I guess, still economics, right? You were incentivized as a client to send data to another party so that other parties would send you data, right? But it was
correct.
It was an optimistic solution to the repeated prisoner's dilemma, right? Those kind of incentives have been core to how all peer-to-peer stuff has worked since, and those ideas are also encoded into Bitcoin and to some extent to Byzantine fault-tolerant solutions like the ones that govern proof of stake, right? Back to Schultz's point with the example of like these validators, these nodes upgrade, these ones don't, these ones aren't making any money, so they are incentivized to get back onto this version. That's really, really, really cool, because like the way in a trustless system those incentives play out is basically the whole ball game. And you see that is like, there's a very, very, very strong incentive to get essentially trustless nodes to act in the collective interest of a decentralized chain continuing to mint blocks. Whereas how that's done in proof of stake is entirely a social dynamic, which is itself an interest. Like, that's completely different, because it's not done via arbitrary, economic belief and essentially a mathematical model. It's done via social dynamics of 100 odd validators agreeing to do a thing. And as soon as you have something that is explicitly socially engineered, it can be attacked and it can be manipulated, and it has that is a built-in vulnerability to the system. I think that is an interesting thing which we see by accident with chain halts, right?
Yeah.
But it's not impossible that it could be either an attack vector or a response to governance in the future.
I think that's a really great point. One thing I want to touch on that is that because it's a social vector to stop it, that means that a lot of the difficulty with chain halts is they often happen due to poor upgrade instructions. So like they'll say, generally there's only a couple steps to like do an upgrade. You check out the new branch, you install it, you move the binary over, you restart, right? These are the 4 steps. Now, sometimes you'll see like do an unsafe reset mid-step, and then this is what happened with Evmos. This is when 4 or 5 validators tombstone themselves, and then we have to roll back. Those upgrade instructions, someone that writes good upgrade instructions they're worth basically infinite value, because they're keeping the chain going, right? There have been multiple chains where like I'll go in and I'll start doing the upgrade, and I'm like, okay, so this is literally going to stop the entire chain, and I'll like put a small PR in that says, well, we should do this instead, and then let's hit and be like, oh, right, crap. I don't mean to my own horn here. Just the importance of like really good documentation is just of the utmost importance, and because it's the social construct that you're talking about, incredibly important.
But that's not even like necessarily just for an upgrade, Schultze. Like sometimes there's just chaff in the installation instructions, or there's just missing information, or there's like duplicate information which conflict with each other in the same document because just care and attention hasn't been put into the instructions. Like I can't remember what chain it was yet, but the other day, and I think it might have only been a testnet to be fair, but I was trying to, like, I was just going through their instructions to look at it while I was booting up their testnet to see if there's anything different to the norm. And I was a bit baffled by the service document for system D, because it had like environment variables for Cosmos in there. For Cosmovisor. And but it wasn't for Cosmovisor. So it was, people sometimes just copy paste stuff and then don't even pick up these types of things, which I don't know if it's because why, but it's not attention to detail that they're putting into it anyway, or they don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway, it pays for the validators and the people who are, involved with these networks to definitely review docs, put some brain power into it when you're reading it, instead of just blindly copy pasting stuff, and submit PRs to fix stuff, because it affects everybody and it's your responsibility as a validator. Yeah.
I do think that overall the documentation is getting better, though. I think there's a lot of copy pasta going on across different chains. Like I think people still go back to docs.juno network or whatever it is and pull out of stuff that you've built and others. And I still see a lot of that showing up everywhere.
From Stargaze, I think Meow
Stargaze came after.
Either Meow or Jay Hernandez wrote some particularly good docs for one of the Stargaze testnets, and the Juno docs for the first Juno testnet came out of that, and then they've just gradually been chipped away at since then. So I think the Juno docs being good, you can trace back to the Stargaze docs being good.
Wow.
In other words, Noel, you don't get that credit that he tried to give you.
You've heard a lot of delegations off those docs, I think. So
Well, I think like
time to give that
the
back.
Frey's also done a lot of work on those docs as well. Like we sort of chip away at them, I think, when either of us get time and update them and fix them. And
Yep.
I don't know. We've rearranged those a lot. The Frey. Certainly, I'm not sure if you're referring to like the actual setup docs that are actually in the GitHub or the actual docs.junonetwork.io. But
the Gitbook stuff. Yeah, the Gitbook stuff I think has shown up other places as I see that being pasted around a little bit. And some chains I think some chains also try to for better or for worse, this is not an opinion, just of what I've seen. I think other chains also give very little information on documentation to try to weed out validators that might not know exactly what's there. Like, I don't need the docs. All I need, give me a Genesis and
and a binary.
What version you're running, like what's a chain ID. That's all I need, right? And maybe a peer or maybe a seed or something else, or standing up a seed or something similar to that. But and then you can see you get a kind of a different variety of validators that get involved depending on the quality of that docs. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it might be different based on projects, based on what the project's trying to do. And I can understand that, right?
So like, incentivized testnet, that might be like test one. Can the validators actually stand up a validator without copy pasting their way to glory?
Right. Yeah. And then I think some of those, like we see in some of these other types of chains, which is just how fast can I write a script to spam the faucet? Like that stuff, like who are we benefiting with this crap? Right. That's a different thing, but somehow we got off the idea of chain halts, but that's back to documentation. To close out go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying, it is interesting as well, just in the last year, how, I mean, and certainly I remember like this time last year, it was, a testnet was launching with spaces in the, incentivized testnets were launching with spaces in the testnet set because you could not get enough people, even with documentation. You could quite readily pasta, your way to glory, as Noel put it. Whereas like now, you see some testnets which get like 1,000 Gen TXs or whatever. So again, it's just another thing when we're talking about how things are moving fast and how things are falling over and all this other stuff. It's worth remembering that there were like 7 live chains in Cosmos at that point.
Right.
It's like 20 now.
I mean, I joined Secret because they couldn't get enough people to validate for it. When I joined, there was like 40 of us. And then there was another month or two before they ended up hitting 50. And that was back in, I don't know, mid last year sometime. So things have moved quick. As soon as the chain comes up, it's already a max every time now.
Yeah. I mean, and it's insane. The floor is lava thing that we talk about a lot. The lava comes up fast.
So I have a couple of other things to add in the just randomly. So weeding out, poor or validators who don't particularly know what they're doing. I suspect that sometimes people put the wrong instructions into a setup on a testnet on purpose, and actually, make purposeful mistakes to see, like, either to make sure that people are helping people or to, weed out people who don't know what they're doing. But the other thing is, like, something I noticed for Stargaze, you mentioning the phrase that during that, some of those test nets, like, they were putting bonuses like into upgrade code. I think it was them. And if you like picked it up by actually reviewing the code before you just blindly run it.
Yeah, it said, don't run this upgrade. If you read this,
if you read this, don't do the upgrade.
Reach out to Jay, I think. And I think nobody spotted it either. And
was that in the contract when they did the contract reviews before they governed in the
the
WASM contract?
Like an early testnet, there was like an upgrade handler. And in the upgrade, the upgrade handler was a no-op, and it said something like, if you read this line, privately contact Jay Hernandez, and if this happened in the real world, don't run the code.
Right.
And I think maybe nobody did, and then they were
I think one person did.
Yeah,
maybe. I don't remember who it was. Yeah.
I think consensus was definitely reached on that handler, as in the handler got 67% or whatever, and so everybody got a little bit of the riot act reading to them.
That's cool.
There's a
But I
guy-
think Meow and Jay were like, had a little bit of fun throwing Easter eggs and stuff all over the place in those test nets. I don't think it was just that one thing. I think they did like a couple of things.
Yeah.
To sort of, see if people are awake or not.
And some of us were not. Like,
Mm.
I guess it also like it depends. It depends like at what point of Juno's first few months that was, as to whether or not I would have been awake at that point versus very much not awake and trying to be like, what is all this SDK shit? Which was definitely where I was last June. I'd just been like,
The hands up.
there's a lot of it. Like if you're trying to stupidly eat the elephant and do the SDK and CosmWasm and everything at once, because you need to write documentation and actually write code and blah, and it's just like, it's a lot of it. So we have some questions in Ask Game of Node. Should we deal with them before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Look
for
at
sure.
those. So the first one, Noel, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I'm not looking at the.
Oh, you're not looking. Okay, well,
I'm on my laptop.
So the question we have on this is Ask Game of Nodes. Why do validators dump? Why do validators dump? That is the question for you now.
Well, I'll start out on that because I've been called out for selling rewards as well. So, and I think a lot of people get some heat at some point in their career for selling rewards. So I think what the general public need to realize in some instances, like, our company is a for-profit company. I think a lot of them are, but also we're running businesses, and a lot of us aren't just anonymous people. We have companies and we have tax to pay, and we have to think about the long-term viability of the companies. We have to have, war chests for potential legal issues. We have to be able to cover, our server costs so that we make sure that we're running for the long term. So, we could be coming in right now to a lull in the market, and who knows how long that'll last. And even people are a long way up the validator list, their incomes are gonna evaporate pretty quickly. And certainly, I think when the prices are low, a lot of validators want to try not to sell as well. So it makes more sense to sell them while they're high. And whether that's high going up or high coming down, like, you don't know where the high is or where the lows might be. So I think in our case, we have other bags that we just constantly compound, but it's more or less our policy that when the prices are rising to sell rewards, and then when the prices are on the way down, we sort of sell them to a point that we think it's diminishing returns and that it's actually hurting the market, and then we sort of stop, and then we just roll them back into the validators or add them to the other wallets, and then just keep compounding and hope for heydays again, nice sunny days, and we make our bails, and then try and save it up for the bad days. But I guess as a business, the long-term goal is to be able to provide your service, rain, hail, or shine, and be able to cover any costs that might come up in the meantime, whether it be unforeseen hardware or labor or legal expenses or anything like that. You don't just run on a shoestring in the hope that everything will be okay, and then you don't want to be forced to sell stuff when the price is really low. And it works different for tax in different countries as well. Like, I know the way our company tax is incredibly different to a lot of the ways, like I think in the UK, the company tax is fundamentally different to how we operate. And again, completely different in the US. And whether you're an individual or a company, like each validator has their own set of circumstances. So I think we're quite fortunate here where we actually benefit a lot when the prices go down, because it reduces our tax bill overall if the end of financial year coincides with a low market. but that hurts a lot of other validators because of their tax laws. They might be incurring tax liability during the year, and if they don't sell their rewards, or at least half of them, to cover that tax, they're making income tax liability, which means that if the token price goes down, their liability doesn't go down. They still owe tax on those high prices. So,
so to summarize that point for somebody who's not an expert in tax. So if you work in this space for any length of time, and certainly one of the core skills of a validator is learning about the tax law in your jurisdiction, because it will determine whether or not you go bust in your first year or not by accident.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of jurisdictions, the second you claim rewards, you owe taxes straight away. So if not everyone, but it is relatively common that something like that happens, something is owed.
Yeah.
So if you then restake those, or do something different with them that doesn't involve turning them into dollars or pounds or euro or yen, you might end up in the situation at the end of the year when the government comes knocking for more money than you have, and then you are bankrupt as a business. And in some countries, that means you can't run a business for the next 5 years, which would be very bad. So there's a whole bunch of things going on there. So quite often when you see validators dumping in any way, shape or form, it's because of it's kind of a function of that sort of thing, which is, as Noel was sort of alluding to, if you anticipate the market is to some extent volatile and you don't want to be not supporting the market. So validators have more tokens rewards as a set than your average sort of user of the network. So what you ideally want is, when there's an economic downturn, you want the validator set to compound, not sell, because that provides price support, and it also signals it's an economic incentive that there's strength in the network, right? And so in order to do that, you have to make sure that you're covering whatever the value of those would be in the downturn when the times are good. Like Noel said, on the way up or the way down, doesn't really matter which. So
or both.
Or both.
Or both.
Which is why you see a lot of people, both investors and engineers, validators, whatnot, people who get paid in crypto, cash it out on the day they get it or immediately restake it. It's the same phenomenon at play.
And just for folks in the US, so in the US, which it might be the same elsewhere as well, I'm guessing it is, but for us, when we pull those rewards, we are treating those rewards as income and the commissions as income at the time and also at the price when that happens. So like what Noel was saying before is, if I have a slide like we're dealing with right now, where Juno has gone from $45 to $13.50 over this time, I'm paying income tax on a coin at $45 at that time that I earned that amount, which was only a few months ago. And so that is income at that amount, but the current value is 13. And if I do sell that at some point in the future, then I can deal with capital gains, which it could be a loss or it could be a gain or whatever else that is. But it's extremely, there's a lot of high risk for a validator in terms of the effect of price on if this business makes sense or not. Because for things like this, when you're dealing with income that's coming into it that way, it could be extremely, extremely negative associated to that, right? That's point one. But one other point on this is that of the mint. So let's focus on Chihuahua, because Chihuahua, I think, there's been a lot of talk around validators dumping on Chihuahua and those types of things, and that's the reason that it's driven down to 0.0003 cents from whatever it was. Of the total mint that's occurring, right? Validator commissions, I think when I look across the commission structure on all these validators, I would say probably the average, there's a lot at 5%, a couple at 10 or 9% in terms of commission, right? So if we average it out at 6% and say, of the total mint that's occurring and the total increase in terms of coin, 6% is going to validators. If all those validators are dumping, from my understanding, if I'm correct here, that over a period of time, 6% is going to validators. If validators are dumping, there's still 94% of mint that's occurring, right?
So something to piggyback on that is that there's a lot of accounts that people don't see because they're not validators, right? So
Sure.
from that drop, there's no cap in that airdrop on Huawei, and there are wallets with hundreds and hundreds of millions of Huawei that are getting the full reward, and they're getting more rewards than the top validator. And there's more than one of those wallets. And then a lot of them are just selling the entire time that Huawei's been live. So the validators selling on that network is, like you say, a small percentage of what is actually being sold. But the thing is that people can see the validators, right?
Right.
They can click on King Nodes or Rhino or Lavender or bloody Needlecast, and they can go to their public wallet and they can see that these guys sold and we're hurting at the moment because the price is down. We're going to get on Twitter and flame the shit out of them.
Right.
And if you want to do that, fine. But
I mean,
just know that it hurts those validators.
I mean, look at the top 10. I mean, even the self-bonded percentage, and even self-bonded is not really a good metric here because sometimes validators might have personal wallets as well as the validator wallet, right? But
nobody uses the validator wallet.
But
so
like King Nodes
staking percent is like the biggest red herring imaginable because everybody. The only time that is ever accurate is if you did incentivize testnet and they say, oh, whatever you used for that one is what we're going to airdrop to, no exceptions. And so you end up with your validator address just having all the locked, locked tokens, whatever they're locked for, 10 years, 12 years, whatever.
Right.
In almost every other situation, I don't know about you guys, but certainly we as a business have, it goes straight in a cold key and goes into a bank vault. And we never touch it, basically, especially anything invested long term.
I would say that I have the highest, and I haven't checked, but I would say that I have the highest self stake in Chihuahua. I think.
Ooh, I'll throw down.
No, you don't. No,
I gotta check.
You don't reckon?
I have more than you, and I'm 42 on this list. Yeah, I think Lavender.
When I say self stake, I mean like my wallet is.
Oh, your personal bags.
No. My validator wallet is staking 45 million. I think I've been turning the rewards back in, but it's not necessarily self-staked in my validator because I.
Oh, you're right. My bad. You're right.
I stake all the way down as well.
You're right. That's correct. You are better. See, this is a good example of the right thing to do. You have 50 million Huawei that's in there, and 20 to you, and another 30 to others across the group. It's noble. Pro Validator has 10 total Huawei staked.
Yeah, it looks like out of the top 10, you are. It is no contest. You are obviously like the number one in there. Yeah. Maybe even the top 20.
But I think the point of this question and like why do they dump? And dump is I think I asked this question when this came up. I forget who was shit posting on Twitter about this topic, but there's so many I can't keep track. But the idea of like there has to be some rewards taken to be able to pay for what's going on. And the running these services are not cheap, whether that is cloud-based services or like we do it from a colo and a mix of cloud, or they're not cheap, right? And I think that's come up, especially if you make bad decisions like using AWS for all your hosting, things like that.
Take your shade.
I was wondering how long my storage choices were going to take to come up.
An hour and 20, I guess. Yeah. But they're not cheap, and like I think Todd from Blockplane just called this out as well, which folks who are listening to this, you have attorney's fees, you have hosting, you have payroll, you might have accountants, you have taxes, you have insurance. It's a business, right?
I'm really glad.
So that overhead is. Sorry, but say it one more time. There you go. So that overhead is not insignificant. And when you start adding these types of things up and being able to pay yourself, or you have a small team or other types of things, or outside consultancy you might be able to use for media or other types of things, there's a significant amount there. And so when something like Chihuahua dumps from 0.008, I think is what it was, if I remember, to literally 4% of that, you're going to see a ton of dumping because those bills are not going away. Those bills don't scale based on what the price is. The taxes of what what is coming from income from 6 months ago, we're still paying for, right? So those types of things I think are important components that I think everybody or some folks I think miss. And it's an important piece. So I think it's difficult to look at just a one wallet or look at a validator or look something on one chain and say, oh, this person is what's driving that cost down. I would think any validate, even all validators dumping would not have a huge impact on price compared to what's going on from a commission perspective.
There's one thing I want to add here. I think as far as your validator is concerned, you want them to be selling basically weekly, maybe even more frequently, because that means it's very relatively small amounts that are constant. Whereas if they're building up for 2 months and they dump it all in one stretch, that's going to dump the price for a moment. It might recover mostly, but it's going to have a noticeable effect. I've seen this several times on Secret where it's common for some reason over there for people to hold it for a long time and then to do one huge sell where you can see a big
I've told them
because they're not selling. They're selling on the market. So if your validator is selling, pulling, let's say every Monday, selling that Monday, and they keep doing that every week, it's basically just going to remain this constant pressure versus one huge event. You want that reliable system rather than a big event to occur.
Yeah, it's from a validator perspective, that's tough to do because I think Null said this earlier. Like it's when prices are going down, man, I'm holding on to this stuff because it's just painful to be able to sell. Like Stargaze is an example of that. Like I think that is so incredibly undervalued. Even getting rid of any of that seems horrible. Like that's a mistake. I'm going to.
That's not investment advice.
I know, right? I know. It's a horrible approach to it, isn't it? It's a horrible approach. Don't listen to me. That's a bad advice. You should. But I think in others, I think some of you guys are much more, like you said, Schultze is much more structured around that, which is, I don't care. I'm not going to look at the price. I'm converting it at this date. And so every Sunday, I'm going to do it. And whatever it is, it is. I think that's probably a much smarter way of being able to think about it over the long term.
I think some people's strategy is to just look at what I do and do the same thing.
That's my whole.
I know at least a couple of people that what Null does filters down.
That's the Rhino tagline, I think.
But there's you go back to BlockPain's comment that you highlighted a minute ago as well. I think there's one final thing about that that's worth drawing out, which I think people don't often think about, which is, in amongst the obvious things, the hosting and the less obvious, the legal fees and insurance. Like, damn, nobody thinks about insurance, but that shit is expensive. There is there was also maybe employee benefits are more of a US thing, because health insurance, whatnot. But payroll is, engineers are really expensive, and convincing people to come and work in crypto is really hard because so to give you an idea, my previous life, I worked as a team lead, managed teams, still wrote code, but did a lot of hiring and whatnot. And for a big engineering department, 60 people, 80 people, you're backfilling a quarter of your department at almost all times with contractors because you can't hire enough people. And you're paying above market. You're doing everything you can to hire, and you would have 4 or 5 senior engineers, principal engineers, doing 2 to 4 hours of recruitment a week, calls, first interviews, second interviews, tech tests, reviewing tech tests, to hire 9 people a year. When you're a validator and you're doing this as independents, that stability of not only saying we are a stable enough operation with stable enough income streams that you can trust us to pay your salary next month is super, super, super hard. Yep. And you have to be credible as somebody who can say that with a straight face and convince somebody to leave what may be a very stable situation for them to come and work in this space. And I think all of us have had the situation where we've looked at our cash flow for the next year, and for some of us the tax year is ending now, so it's you start to do projections for the next year, and you go, okay, well, can we bring more people into the operation for, there are other projects, there is a lot of stuff involved in running a validator, maybe there are more chains that you want to move into, and or teams that want you to help out with X, Y, or Z. And that thing where I think a lot of independent validators basically do everything with 1, 2, 3 people tops, maybe the odd contract hour here and there from people they know that will do the odd bit of contract work. But running on quite a shoestring in terms of
Mhm.
development hours, you know?
Or any hours, right? Infrastructure monitoring, this, that. What I mean, I think that's one of the other reasons that I think this GON started, which was just validators helping out, because whether that is being able to be informed about something, or snapshots, or helping with this, or I need
Snapshots was the big
somebody
one, wasn't it?
help me with XYZ, right? Like
Yeah.
it's very difficult as a small kind of, I guess, business owner, if you want to say that, to be able to do it all yourself, or even with a small team, because it truly takes more than that, right?
Well, I think from memory, the original thing that we all started chatting about was letting each other know when our nodes were down,
Right.
because sometimes you screw up, you know, especially before we all got onto BlockPane's tender duty. Some of the stuff, I'm particularly Grafana, I'm looking at you, like, was quite flaky in terms of actual good uptime notifications.
Yeah.
And I
I'm,
have
I'm slowly changing everyone to Zabbix.
yeah, I have a double tap notification system now where I have my own homebrew one and the other stuff, so that I get two. And if I know if two happen, then it's real. It's 100% real. It's on. That's how paranoid I am. But like, that was how I think this conversation started happening, which was, you know, essentially having snapshots and things to recover, and also because we were already talking, so we're going, dude, your node's down. But you know, we found a community to sort of help us out with that. But like, I think all of us, you know, look into the future and go like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a couple of keen young interns, or whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all a kind of part of the, you know, like, when you talk about building tech organizations, like, we're obviously unrelated organizations, or the validators, but there is, like, you know, there's a social set of everybody, and everybody is trying to professionalize to a lesser or greater extent, or at least stabilize their operations. And that's like very common in all organizational growth, that you have sort of like a pioneer period, then you have like town planners come in, and then you build a city there, and then that's a stable technology. And we're like way off in the wild west, where we're still pioneering. And all of us are just trying to work out a way of getting to the point that we can actually start like putting a well down, or
Right.
whatever it is you guys did out west in America. And to be fair, I guess relatively recently in Australia, at least in terms of putting in, you know, more modern infrastructure.
That's right.
Hey, our internet can get a solid 50 megabits per second on a good day with fiber.
Which is amazing. It's
Oh,
incredible. When you actually think
Really?
about the global component of that, like if you actually think about how much data is being moved there, and the location, and like, it is, I mean, it's maybe it's my age showing. It's fascinating me.
The
I used to live
final
in
bit carried on camel across the desert.
Yeah, I used to live. I lived in Chicago. I remember having a single and dual. I remember going from single channel ISDN to dual channel ISDN and thinking that was unbelievable at 256K a second, right? Like, I remember those days of like actually getting, when the phone rang, you went from 256 to 128. I was like, shit, somebody called me. I'm losing like downloads and those types of things, or even 300 baud
the
modems.
call
I mean,
waiting's
I go
like
way back.
fucking up the.
Yeah, call waiting. We used to fuck up. Exactly. They used to happen. Back,
Yeah.
you used to do that. I forget what the star number was.
56K to broadband was like a revelation, wasn't it?
56K to ISDN was, because I remember moving from 300 to 1200 to 24 to 19.6 to 56K to then to ISDN. And then the first time I actually was on broadband, it was unbelievable. I remember having a T1 in the office. I thought that was incredible.
I think I jumped straight from 56K to broadband. So it was just like, can't load a page to like light speed. And I don't think it's never been that much of a jump.
Schulte has no idea what the fuck I'm talking about right now.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, all right.
I mean, the irony here is that, like, I think that a lot of torrenting came about because they needed some sort of technology for, like, how do you continue to download whenever it ends, right? And so now we're kind of coming full circle with that, where blockchain is basically torrenting, really. If you want to extrapolate it far enough out, that's basically what it is. And so now we're using it in some sort of global scale to resolve something that we thought was resolved 20 years ago. And so will there be something that comes along that makes blockchain redundant again? I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. We'll see. Yeah.
So,
and Roman just talked about Starlink as well. Like, just watching that kind of go where it's going has also been pretty amazing. Like, that type of technology then opens up to say, where do I want to live, right? And other types of things that are important to me, which is unfortunately bandwidth is important to me. But having some stable bandwidth and those types of things, that means you'd be able to open up anywhere you want to live, and you could put middle of Montana with a 200 megabit. What the heck, man? It's crazy.
So I have two things to add, particularly around Australia. One thing is that our population density isn't very big, and our country is incredibly fucking huge. So the cost of our network is enormous per capita.
Right.
And which makes our internet not as cheap as it could be. But I think the government's just taken a pretty big L on that, because our broadband network's owned by the government here, because no private company in their right mind would build it, because they would never be able to profit from it. But I think one day our publicly owned network will probably get privatized at a discount, so someone can profit off it at some point.
Yeah, that kind of seems the way, isn't it?
Yeah, someone makes the money at the end of the day, who's probably buying an official lunches right now to get in their pocket. Anyway,
right.
So on Starlink,
Yes.
I just pulled a Starlink out of the box yesterday and
Really?
plugged it in, business Starlink, and my God, I was just astonished. So latency isn't that good, obviously, but it's better than a normal satellite by a long shot. So I had this is in Armidale in New South Wales. It's in the middle of nowhere, and I had just sitting on top of my car with the satellite dish, a latency of 40, a download speed of 220 megabits, and an upload of about 25 megabits at that point. And it was cloudy.
40 milliseconds to where?
So that was from a SpaceX point, I think, to the speed test on the phone.
So I think that demarks back to somewhere within Australia, right? It doesn't automatically demark to California or something like that, right? It
probably. So they go to the lowest latency public server, but it would have been on the surface, but probably in America somewhere. Would have been the endpoint from SpaceX. But I mean, it doesn't particularly matter so much, I don't think, where the endpoint is, because they've got stations all over the world. But in terms of the round trip, would have been 40 milliseconds for a satellite, because of the low Earth orbit is
amazing.
We have. We have technical issues trying to get internet out in the bush, and that is a revelation for us, because there are no other options other than if the cell network doesn't reach there, and there's a lot of black spots on the cell network that aren't on public roads or in cities. Right. You go out into the bush somewhere, and you need even for emergency services, you need some sort of deployment for your emergency services, unless you're getting Iridium Go satellite from our main carrier and paying a shitload of money to get it there on a trailer. You've got no options. The bloody Starlink, I could plug into my inverter in my car, stick it on my roof, and have local Wi-Fi for anyone that's there, whether they're an emergency service or what have you. It's pretty cool. Revolutionary for us.
That's pretty cool. I know there's some SSH clients out there as well that are, I think, built around that, because SSH obviously is every keystroke, right? Where you might feel that latency, but I think it just brings it all local. Then whenever you hit enter, it goes, right? So you can have some structure where it does some work where you don't really. So that 40 milliseconds might not feel like 40 milliseconds, even if you're going to Hetzner or something else in the US or whatever else, just because, trying to trick it a little bit. So I'm sure even with that, it would feel like you're right next to it, right? Pretty cool.
To be fair, I'm not SSHing over a satellite. I'm watching YouTube and Netflix.
Okay, so
yes,
after our extended return to the bush and Noel having gone walkabout for a little bit there, shall we do what you're most excited about this week and wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I'll go.
I feel like I've just insulted the whole of Australia, and if I ever go back there again,
it all comes back to Australia.
We like that episode of The Simpsons where the Prime Minister of Australia bends over Bart Simpson and gives him a kicking in the ass.
I'll find you, man.
On a live broadcast, you took the piss out of Australia, and therefore you're going to pay. So you said,
Yeah.
what are you most excited about this week?
I look forward to dumping all my Cerberus and Chihuahua and everything else, just selling all rewards across all chains, just to try to dump the price as much as I can with my small bags. No, I think this week it's great that Evmos started back up today. I think that's great. I know there's still work to do there in terms of enabling ledger support, and inflation will come back and those types of things. I think that's great. Kind of on the heels of some of the stuff related to dumping, we're getting ready this is more of a personal thing, but from a Rhino perspective, we're getting ready to announce something associated to doing some kind of large scale donations from the rewards that we earn. It's something that we've been kind of working on for a little bit of time. So we're getting ready to relaunch a new website and some other stuff related to why it's named Rhino and kind of what we think about that and those types of things. So that's all coming in the next week or so. So that's pretty exciting as well. And I think that's it. I see No and Defund Finance and Althena and all these other types of things that are the kind of the next wave. I think this kind of early 2022 wave of test nets are happening, which is also pretty exciting to see some of these projects moving forward. So that's kind of what's up for me.
Nice.
Schultzy? Yeah, Schultzy, hit it.
Yeah, I can go next. Less to do with the Cosmos itself, but I'm actually really excited about. I'm gonna start playing with Horcrux this next week. I'm gonna try doing some more like redundancy type missions, if you will, and it scares the absolute hell out of me. And so naturally, I'm pretty excited for it.
Nice.
So that's what I'm looking forward to next week.
I'm actually on not completely Cosmos thing, but more of on a personal company thing. I'm excited about our company evolving, especially in this lower red period in the token price. Like a lot of the heat comes off in terms of like the fast pacing of things, and like users tend to wane a little bit when the prices are low, and that gives us time as a company to work on things like website, and also our company is working on policies, which I want to be a big part of our strategy moving forward. I want people to be able to come to our website, see our strategy in our policies, and know exactly what we're about. So that'll include things like our token selling policy, to support our business, our network selection policy, our governance policy, how you can expect that we'll vote, and what our goals are for governance voting and things like that. So we'll have a dedicated policies page with all of our policies listed out. And I really want to see that live, but it's a little bit of work left in that before we can get that out. But our new website's almost completed, so I'm pretty happy to get that out. And thanks to our validator friends who pointed me in the right direction to help me get development for that done as well.
I look forward to plagiarizing all that content for my own use.
I was just thinking exactly the same thing. All great ideas organizationally. I wish we had thought of that.
We've talked about it. Came up, right? We've talked about this, but I think we all have a pretty similar approach to what's important as an independent validator. And I know you're working on it. No, I think it'd be good for us to. I want to be able to collaborate with that too. I know it's kind of a personal thing, but also kind of a community thing. But I don't want to be able to produce something that follows too much to what you're saying, because I know that we agree in terms of how we approach it, right? So it's kind of a challenge.
So to me, I want people to be able to. It's important to have it on the website. It's important that when people go there, they can go and see what you're about. And
right.
I think it spaces you from like directionless. At least you know what you're going to get if you come and stake with King nodes. You're going to get this in governance. You're going to get he's going to be selling at these particular times or in this market condition. Why. Those types of things. I just think it's important for the delegators to know what they're getting into.
And governance.
As an aside, somebody asked earlier, and I'm going to put this in our notes for Ask Game of Nodes for next time.
Mhm.
But whether or not it makes validators uncomfortable when community asks them to show their reasoning on particularly like proposals, but I guess like broader anything. And I think this is a good example. And like I say, we're wrapping up now, so we'll maybe come back to this in Ask Game of Nodes next week. But it is, I think, we were talking about this in relation to Prop 16 in the past, and we've talked about it on several shows as this kind of, if we're playing around with social consensus here, then one of the things that I think it probably is important for validators to do is think about these things and present their reasoning, because like you were saying just then, Usurper, like when one validator presents their reasoning, it tends to be that we then have to talk about it.
Mhm.
And that might be as simple as something which is like policies, which is a good thing for us to be doing, or it could be what happened with Prop 16, where Schultze wrote a really good write-up, and Polkachu wrote a write-up, and like a lot of the validators actually wrote up their thoughts and then talked about them.
Right.
And that was hugely important to people even decide, because there was a point, I think, where we were looking, things were looking much more like a really adversarial situation, a hard fork, something like that. And I think everybody being able to come back and around the table was very, very largely helped by that. People showing their reasoning for any given thing. And I think if the validators are necessarily public, right? So part of what we do is have to represent the network. That's part of why you get paid as a validator, right? Is to be doxed and public and have to share your reasoning to some extent.
Right.
Maybe.
I think ultimately as a validator though, like we're motivated by what's best for the network ultimately, because
Yes.
the network surviving and being successful is in our interest, right? So
yeah, economically and I guess ideologically, like it's a strong incentive.
Yeah, I mean some validators don't even care that much about the economic incentive over the ideology of a blockchain, and others are more economically driven. But regardless of which camp you're in, or a mixture of the both, ultimately your validator wants the network to survive and they want it to succeed because it's in their best interest. And I think if I could just say one thing, like as we close out with the Juno props that are going on at the moment, no matter what your opinion, please don't shout it at people. Let other people just come to their own conclusion and make their own decision. So I get people like DM me asking me which way I'm going to vote on things, and then trying to convince me one way or the other. Like, that's not the way to do it. Have your own opinion, make your own vote, but let people arrive at their own decisions, and don't shout it at them what they should be doing and make them feel obligated to do one thing or the other.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. But then that's also a function of the fact that, you're Australian and Australians don't like being told what to do, right?
Yeah, except, if you contrast that with our voting over here, we have to vote or we get fined. So, but we have anonymous voting here, and for governance, I'm talking about it with the government, federal and all of our elections. If you don't go and make a vote, you get a fine in the mail. So you have to go and vote.